in tune to Night Talk. Get on the information highway by calling 1-800-326-2529. That's 1-800-326-2529.
I'm Bob Law. I am Bob Law. The program is Night Talk. And on this 5th day of Kwanzaa, we celebrate Nia, purpose. And it is my purpose to hear right along and through here, as they would say in Ebonics. It is my purpose to try and provide some clarity. Let me explain again the position taken by the Oakland School Board and where that whole position is coming from politically, culturally, historically. What the Oakland School Board and others have said is that there is a body of language that is being spoken in the African American community, whether folk want to admit it or not, and that it is not slang. Slang is when children say, I rushed over here, and they say instead, I jetted over here. Jet, that's the word for rush right now. When people say things like this, those are some nice vines or threads that you're wearing, talking about clothing, and all of that changes almost annually. And so that is slang. When you're ready to leave and you say, let's book, that's slang. That is not what this other language, linguistic form that is expressed by a whole lot of us that is not slang. The linguistic form expressed by a great many African Americans is a language, a form of a linguistic form that comes out of the very real history of Africans in America. People who were taught language by ignorant Southern farmers, people who told slaves to go on up there and fetch that thing. You'll hear? You know, they fetch it here and up the road a piece and along and through here, and a whole terminology. Been done gone. You know, that's Ebonics. Been done gone. But that is the way that Africans were taught English by ignorant Southern farmers who also could not speak English very well, who had no great command of what is now called Standard English. It is passed along. It is mixed with African words. It has an application to apply a certain kind of emphasis. And for many people, they really don't know another way to place the same emphasis on what it is that they are saying. When you look at, when somebody wants to say, as our guest, Professor Bao pointed out, but they be rapping. What they mean by that is that they are rapping very well. They be playing some ball. What they mean by that is that they are playing ball very well. And there are a lot of people, a lot of young people particularly, who really don't know another way to express that. And one of the reasons that they don't know is because the American educational system continues to fail the needs of the student. It continues to fail to address the very real needs of African American students who come out of a cultural, social, historical environment that has shaped their ability, that has shaped how they relate to the rest of the world. It is an educational system that was designed to poorly educate black children. And that is what the educational system has been doing. Now, the folks out in Oakland said, given the fact that the educational system has been designed to poorly educate black children, given the fact that we're talking about children in the 6th grade and the 7th grade who cannot speak standard English, and it occurs to us that children in the 6th or 7th or 8th grade are children who have been in these schools for 6, 7, or 8 years, and after being in school for 6, 7, or 8 years, they still cannot speak standard English. Something needs to be put in place to correct that right now. And so what they said is that we have to recognize that this Ebonics represents for these students a effective means of communications, an effective means of communication that is shared not only by the students, but by a number of people in their total environment, by other members of their families, by adults in their community. See, we're talking about these students, but they are not the only ones who talk like that. And so it, in a very real sense, constitutes another real language form, whether we like it or not. And there is nothing in place in the school system to correct it and to really structurally and effectively teach standard English. So the Oakland School Board says that it is our intention that African Americans, it is our intention to give African American students the ability to have standard English proficiency in reading, writing, and speaking. Now, in order to do that, it's quite simple. Let's look at what the schools do for other groups of people who come to this country, who come into the public schools without the ability, without standard English proficiency. What do schools do? What they do is they put in place a structured program with teachers who are trained, with funding to make it effective. They print materials. They set aside a budget to teach the Vietnamese, the Polish, the French, whoever, standard English. So at the end of a short amount of time, 1 or 2 or 3 years in the schools, you now have Vietnamese children, Korean children, Asian children, European children who are able to speak standard English much better than African American children who have been in the school system all this time. It is not because those other children have a greater ability to master standard English. It is because those other children are the only children who are actually being taught standard English as a second language. The children in the African American children in these public schools are not being taught. It is not that the children can't learn. They are learning at the level at which they are being instructed. We have children in the 6th grade reading at a 3rd grade level because they are being taught at a 3rd grade level. And so what the school board in Oakland said is that the very same tried and tested process, tried and true process that has been used to give other students standard English proficiency should also be used to give African American students standard English proficiency. You are bringing money in, you are setting up programs, you are putting things in place in order to teach other children standard English proficiency, yet you continue to deny the necessary allocation of resources to teach African American children. Asian and Hispanic students are eligible for $262 million in Department of Education Title VII funds that will provide bilingual education for the 700,000 children under the fiscal 1997 budget. And what they are saying in Oakland is that similar funds should be eligible for black children as well. Otherwise, you will have Asian and Hispanic students with a standard English proficiency that is greater than that African American children have. And people will still be talking about, well, how is it possible that the Asians and the Hispanics and the whoever else are able to master the language and our children can't? Again, the answer is easy. Because $262 million in Department of Education Title VII funds have been set aside, if you will, to provide bilingual education for those students. None has been set aside to provide bilingual education for your children. And so the folks in Oakland said that we can no longer tolerate that kind of misappropriation of necessary resources. That what is being spoken by African American children is as endemic, it is as, what is the word for when it is all over? It is as pervasive as a language as any other group of people coming into this country speaking a different language and are thereby in need of bilingual education. The folks in Oakland have said, so are our children, whether we like it or not, whether we want to admit the legacies of racism and the legacies of slavery. This language form is a legacy of historical and systematic racism in America, a racism that has denied quality education to African American children consistently, and certainly through now. I'm telling you, it's not enough to tell children stay in school. You've got to make the schools worth staying in. It's not enough to tell children keep hope alive in school. You've got to do something about the very nature and character of those schools. It's not enough to tell children that they must excel. You've got to put resources in their hands that makes excellence, achieving excellence possible. Have to stop going into schools with slogans and begin to go into school with lawsuits and go into the schools with a clear understanding of the issue on the level of curriculum and instruction. And when you don't know, fortunately, there are so many competent, quality, world-class educators who have the expertise and the willing to guide, that nobody should open their mouth about what is in the best interest of the children on the level of education. When you have a national arena, when folk will come just because your name is recognizable, and so the press will come to your press conference. Jesse doesn't need to have a press conference until he talks to Regent Adelaide Sanford. Doesn't need to have an education conference until he talks to Sheila Trainum here in New York City. Talks to Donald Smith here in New York City. Talks to Carolyn Leonard in Portland, Oregon. Enough styling and profiling. No more nonsense from anybody.
Information Radio. You're tuned into Night Talk, a coast-to-coast exchange of opinions impacting the African American community. Night Talk returns in a moment.
This is Night Talk. You're on the air.
Yes. Hi, Bob Law.
Hi.
I have a question about the Ebonics. I was calling in regards to, I was wondering, would that hinder our children? Because I was reading an article in the New York Times about, I forgot, like 93 or 94. And I was wondering, with the bilingual program, what they had mentioned in the article that it made the Hispanics lag behind. Would that be the same effect for African Americans with the Ebonic program?
They lied.
Oh, they lied.
Understand this. Yeah, they lied. Understand this. The bilingual program did not make the Hispanics lag behind. An incompetent, low-performing school system makes Hispanics and black students lag behind. It's not any single approach. The bilingual program has not caused Asians or French or Polish children to lag behind. And so it is not the bilingual program. It is how the enemies of Hispanic and African American people sum up those programs that are in place that would actually help us. What causes students to lag behind are textbooks that are non-existent. You go into a school, there's a video that we show when we do these forums on education that shows a 7th grade classroom in New York City in the Bronx, in two schools. One is in a white community, and the other is in a black community, both in the Bronx, both 7th grade. As you go into the classroom with the camera, in the white school, competent teachers, people who dress like professionals. In the black school, teachers in slacks and jeans, T-shirts look very, very different than the teachers in the white school. The teachers establish a different kind of ambiance, while in the black school, there is some discussion about a kind of informal order being of value, but they don't even allow for that discussion in the white school. And as you get into the classroom, in the music classroom, in the white school, all of the children had the individual instruments of their choice. Children were learning to play violins, guitars, saxophones, clarinets. In the black school, everybody had one single electric keyboard. In the white school, in the science classroom, there were microscopes and science equipment and test tubes and a qualified science teacher. In the black school, there was no textbook, no microscopes, no science equipment, and the teacher was a dance instructor. who said that he had been given the science class because as a dancer, he had some knowledge of the of anatomy. And he also admits in the video that he was really in here just testing to see whether or not he would like to pursue teaching science. For him, these children were part of an experiment. And so as those children graduate from one grade to the other, there's a group of children who are more proficient in Spanish than those in the black school. Not because the children in the black school are incapable of learning science, rather, but because there is not a science course. There is no meaningful science curriculum. And so in the article in the New York Times says that the bilingual program is holding Hispanic students back. They lied. What they ignored was a low-performing school system that does not even begin to teach at grade level. And then what happens in the school systems around the country is the effort is to blame the parents and the community from which the students come, and to blame anything that is proposed as a method that would effectively upgrade the quality of education. Anything that is proposed, and consider this, the people who reject it are people like Albert Shanker from the American Federation of Teachers, people like Diane Ravitch, who is an education consultant. Now, they have been involved in this education movement. They have been involved in education all of their lives, all of their careers, rather. And their careers are long now. Albert Shanker, Diane Ravitch, they have been there for some 30 years, or more than 3 decades. Under their leadership, the quality of public education has consistently declined. And in the black community, the quality of public education has declined dramatically. This is why Shanker is the head of the teachers union. This is why Diane Ravitch is a noted and highly regarded education consultant. Well, if you look in New York City, where the members of the Board of Education, like Irene and Palazzari, these are people who have been involved in education all of their career. Under their watch, the quality of education gets worse and worse and worse, but they are never held responsible. They have always been able to shift the blame for that to the parents, to the community, and to any effort that community people, and I don't mean just mothers and fathers in the community, I mean educators. Dr. Donald Smith, who is a noted and respected educator, Regent Adelaide Sanford, Molefe Asante, any other ones, just name names that people may not be familiar with, but world-class educators around the country have offered curriculum changes, have offered methodology changes, have offered strategies in order to upgrade the quality of education, and Ravitch and Shanker have rejected all of them. And so there hasn't been any that the American Federation of Teachers has endorsed and accepted. However, they have also never proposed anything that has worked. And so we begin to wonder whether or not their function is to actually upgrade the quality of education, or whether or not their function is to maintain the poor quality that currently exists. I believe that their function is to guarantee that the children who are in schools in the urban centers will always be poorly educated. How is it possible to continue to accept Diane Ravitch's opinion on anything when under her watch the quality of education gets worse and worse? And so when the New York Times sums that up, what they are doing, it's not the writer of the article who has summed it up. The writer of the article has gone to these very same educators and has asked them, well, what is the problem? And they have said, well, it is the bilingual program that is at fault. But how can you continue to accept the opinion of these educators when their track record as an educator is so pitiful? So they lie. All right?
Okay. I do have time for one more question.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I know that when I attended college, I know that I got B's, and it was like I got B's instead of A's because I couldn't write. So I understand at first I was against it because Jesse Jackson and all was coming on. But I can see that we would make kids understand it better, because it's a shame if you're striving hard and you're doing your best as you can and you're held responsible for what hasn't really been taught from
That's
you
right.
from the beginning.
That's right. No, Jesse was absolutely wrong, still wrong. And I understand that Jesse is calling for an education conference, and to that conference, he is invited, as far as I understand, he has invited the same black celebrities. He's invited Maya Angelou, and I don't know who else, but I'm not aware of him reaching out for any of the educators around the country. And secondly, there are already education conferences that are being called by black educators. And what Jesse needs to do is to attend one of those rather than to call one of his own. See, there's a whole effort to always position oneself as the leader, even in arenas where oneself has no idea what he's talking about. All right now.
Okay, much success for the new year.
All right now, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hotep, Bob.
Hotep.
How you doing?
Good.
You talk about mad at Miles. I'm mad at Maya Angelou and Reverend Jesse Jackson. Now, here's where I'm coming from. Black English is standard deviation. Slang, you break that down, it's not slang, it's dialect, right? Now, when you talk about the African part, and I don't want to go too far, because I just want to go to what they're really talking about when they say that bad English. They're talking about a certain grouping or cluster of people who live in greater metropolitan areas, and also who speak with a language of the South. Those are two things. Who speak with a certain cadence, rhythm, rhyme, and dialect, which they call idiomatic. That is just personal. It comes from within. It's not like the King's English in England, but there's no one in this country who speaks the King's English, Bob, and you know that. In radio and broadcasting, when you learn the English, the closest thing comes from the people in the Midwest. They talk about the sound and the plane is round. That means that you don't have a Brooklynese or a Southern. You speak a Midwestern tone, which does not distinguish you. And it's the older English is the Chaldean. I can speak Chaldean English, and people would think if I spoke that would be Ebonics. But that's not Ebonics. That's a very Eurocentric thing. And the next thing I want to say, language exists within a community of people who use a set of agreed upon symbols to express ideas and psychological needs. The Afrocentric scholar finds the source of the people's truth close to the language. In the United States, Ebonics serves as the archetype of African American language. That comes from Dr. Sante. In 1970. But when you go to the understanding of the ignomatic, you say ignomatic, the personal thing in the dialects in the United States. Even the white scholars say we have to be very cautious because even white scholars would never say that this was an inferior language, not expressive, that's not informative, and does not work. They would not even do that. Even those who speak about it say it does serve its purpose. It is as strong as any other language. And see, our people have to recognize something. We can't be hooked into the guilt of this thing. What do you call it, Bob? This radical integration, this idea that we feel ashamed of the language of our people, that we want to integrate without having the power of integration.
Let me say we're out of time. We have to break, but I think that you are correct that much of what has been our response has been based on a kind of guilt that how this Ebonics, as it is called, represents for many black people somehow the failure of black people to master basic requirements in this society. And again, to internalize that, to view any inadequacy as a failure on the part of black folk is again to make the aggression of black people invisible and to indict ourselves for the consequences of that aggression. What has happened out in Oakland is that they have said we refuse to make the aggression against black people invisible. We will not accept the responsibility as some flaw in our character or in our intellect when we look at what exists as a legacy and as a result of that aggression against our people. And in order to turn it around, in order to improve the condition and the status of our people, there are some things that we have to put in place to absolutely make sure that we are able to achieve proficiency on a number of levels. And in this case, in terms of standard English, I think that it is a correct as well as a courageous move on the part of the Oakland School Board. I'm out of time. We have to break. We'll be back after this.
Night.
Oh, the program is Night Talk. One of the good things about this confusion and this whole controversy around Ebonics is that at least the people who were responding and even rejecting, rather, the Ebonics were doing so because they thought that it would be harmful to the children, and it was just a mistake. But at least that is good. People who were trying to look out for the best interest of the children and felt that this was just not in the interest of the children. So hopefully, at least, it wasn't just that as middle-class adults they were embarrassed by the public stating of Ebonics as a legitimate language. There are some folk who just really don't like to hear that, but giving them the benefit of the doubt, many of the people who were confused were really confused because they misunderstood and thought that the standard was being lowered in the educational process for African American children. But at least their intentions were right. Some of them, their intentions were right. My concern is that you have to be far, far removed from the realities in the American educational system to think that there is a process that could lower the standards. These standards are so low already. I mean, consider, we're talking about students who cannot speak standard English. Now, do you understand the contradiction just in that term? Students. That means people enrolled in school, people who are in the classroom every day. Students who cannot speak standard English. How is it possible that you can be a student and not speak standard English all at the same time? See, the other people who come to this country who are in need of bilingual education can at least point out that they are coming from a different environment where there is no one teaching or speaking on any regular or consistent basis standard English. They're coming from Vietnam. They're coming from Korea. And so you can understand how it is that 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders cannot speak standard English. But we're talking about African American children who have been in these American schools for 6, 7, or 8 years. How is it possible that being in the schools for 6 or 7 or 8 years, they cannot speak standard English? It is because the schools are not teaching. The curriculum as it currently exists, the approach in terms of curriculum and instruction is so flawed that the students are not being taught effectively or properly. And so in Oakland, they say, let's fix that. Let's make sure that in terms of standard English, we begin now to teach more appropriately and therefore more effectively. But understand, it is not a failure on the part of the student because they do not speak standard English. They are in a school where they have been for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. And how can you fail to teach anyone anything after 8 years of trying? You cannot. That's not a failure. That's an accomplishment. Not to teach after having the student in your environment for 8 years, you have to be skillful to avoid teaching. I mean, this is very difficult not to teach if you've got the student sitting in front of you year after year for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. You've got to be really good at low performance. You've got to make sure don't give out homework, don't give out old textbooks, set an environment in your classroom where the students are allowed to address you by saying yo. I mean, I've been in schools, if the truth be told, in the black community, where the teachers who dress like the students think it's hip, or at least pretend that they think it's hip, that the students can refer to them, yo, Mr. Jones. I mean, you got to put that in place in order to guarantee that the children will not be properly and adequately educated. You can't just forget, and you've got to work at it every day. If you just try it, look at your children and see there are things that you have to teach your children to do, and without any real structured lesson plan, you are teaching your children all the time, and they are learning. How is it that these professionals can't do it? They have argued they don't have the resources. Okay, then that's the problem. You don't have the resources. Not that the children can't learn. You know what I mean? But we have to look at this issue of, look at the politics of education. How is it that you don't have the resources? If there is, in fact, $262 million in Department of Education Title VII funds for bilingual education, well then, how come y'all don't have the resources in the black community? Because the children, are the children and their parents blocking that money from coming into the system? Or is it inept leadership in the political arena and on the part of the people who are still in control of the educational system? I'm telling you, in 1997, we need to move away from all of these debates, and we need to begin to erect an independent school system. Real work. It's time to get busy. Or just keep going to rallies and talking about the problems and don't build anything. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, yeah. How you doing, Bob?
Good.
Yeah, with me, as far as the Ebonics, I think it's a great day. And the simple reason why I say that is because I'm college educated, but, and this has just happened, a phenomenon has just happened within the last 20 years within my family. And everybody else in my family for generations has been speaking Ebonics. And now when I hear the thing about Ebonics, I can look at some of the people that didn't have any education and they communicated very well and just smile. I tell you, man, it's just a big smile knowing my grandmother, both my grandmothers who couldn't read and write too much, they did a real good job.
Absolutely. And you know, some of the people who have been critics of this move in Oakland are people like Maya Angelou, who has written poems in Ebonics,
yeah,
and who has celebrated the experience that has produced that linguistic form. And so again, and has never been embarrassed by it, but I guess perhaps because it was being characterized as something from the past that some other Africans did, what the old folk used to do.
Oh yeah, you know.
And so in that sense, it was all right to assign it to something charming about our grandparents. But, and I don't know, so there's, some of us are real disappointed in how some of these folk have summed it up. But
yeah,
again, for some of them, people were going beyond just being embarrassed by being reminded that there is this legacy of oppression that still exists within our people, and we're trying to really respond in the best interest of young people. They thought that a broken English, something other than standard English, was going to be taught, and we're trying to make it clear that is not at all what the Oakland School Board has said, and I don't understand where even the confusion came from, because the statement from the Oakland School Board said, we do not intend to teach Ebonics. I mean, how much clearer can you be?
Right.
They said, we intend to teach standard English and to achieve proficiency in standard English in both, our goal is to give African American students the ability to have standard English proficiency in reading, writing, and speaking. So now what is there to misunderstand?
Nothing. I just wanted to mention one real quick thing, and I'll be off. I was sitting down, and I was listening to a Martin Luther King speech, and he used Ebonics. There's a certain part where he says, tell him not to mention that I have, the degrees. He used the word tell him. That's Ebonics. So, when people got to realize that's the way that we speak when we're relaxed and we're comfortable and we're talking to our own people. That is the way all of us, the majority of us, speak. The college, when you're learning the standard English, that is something for someone else, and our kids are beginning to realize. We have to learn it because we're in a certain position, but to me, the Ebonics means that we are coming from some place that's stable. All right, peace, Bob.
All right, now where are you calling from?
Oh, Baltimore.
All right, now thank you for your call.
Okay, brother.
Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, Hotep, brother.
Hotep.
I think the discussion around the issue is more telling about what some things in our community as the issue itself. I think that one of the things that was so disturbing is that people didn't give the people in Oakland an opportunity to explain exactly what their position was and what their program entailed. Rather, this weekend I heard all this dialogue that I characterize as being kind of insane, where anything black people come up with is automatically attacked. Anything that will that doesn't allow us to act like, look like, and emulate some other folks has to be under attack.
Come on.
And I don't understand the insanity of that behavior. I mean, I listened, and it was a pain. I heard painful dialogue from people who I had some kind of respect. I mean, I said to myself, wait a minute, why isn't L.A. Stanford on the radio? I mean, where the African-centered educators? I mean, even Dr. Jeffries.
And they are here, but
and
the people...
Right, they're available.
But the people who are
talking about it, I mean...
See, one of the things that is troublesome is that there's some media folk, Black Talk Radio in some instances, where the effort was to be provocative rather than informative. In New York City, how do you go on and get educators to talk about it and not deal with any of the people who are involved in this whole education movement? If you go for even if you want to do it on an activist level, well, if you're going to have a conversation just on the level of activism, and you want to talk to some activists who have been involved in the education movement in New York City, so how is it that you don't call Bob Law or Akeem Sentwali? I mean, who are the activists in New York City who have been in the last decade, in the last few years for sure, very much involved, even nationally? I mean, Akeem Sentwali has just been brought in from Mount Vernon, is being hired at school boards around the state as a consultant, as an education activist who has shut down schools and has been organizing communities. His own community has worked with me. It is, how does that happen?
Taking a stand, and I noticed today in major white press, it was reported that he intends to have a educational conference in Oakland in February with Maya Angelou and other prominent Afro-Americans. And see, it's not only Jesse and the Rainbow Coalition. You had Koisi Afumi, who's the head of the NAACP, who said that when Congress convenes, he's going to write a letter in order to ask them not to make any federal funds for the Ebonics program. It appears to me in 1995, when we sent the leadership around the Million Man March, 1 million black brothers went to Washington. And many of us went there because we saw and heard from a kind of leadership that we can actually really trust. And also, out of that, we were looking for a organization, a black organization that will speak on the best and in the best interest of the black community. And coming out of the Million Man March, it appears that the same old civil rights leaders, same old civil rights organization are still speaking on the behalf of the black community. You have the NAACP, you have the Rainbow, all these civil rights leaders. The question I want to ask, Bob, when is it, where is, the people are asking, where is the leadership going to come among the activists?
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be clear that who the people, and it is clear if the leadership in terms of the activists come together and call for a kind of leadership summit so that we can begin to look at and begin to follow the kind of leadership that we trust. Because in a real sense, around the Texaco, the same civil rights leaders just sold us out. And it seems like the people just seems to waiting for something else to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really concerned that not Jesse them and Kwesi Afumi, I understand where they're coming from, but where is the leadership that's going to challenge them? That's what I believe that needs to be in place.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right, we'll see. Maybe somebody has some answers. Keep listening. This is Night Talk. Hello. Hello.
All right, Brother Bob.
Hi.
This is Abdullah Shabazz.
Yes, sir.
Detroit. And it really upsets me the way a lot of our people, they have been explained to them about what's going on in Oakland, California, and it seems like they still don't understand. And some of these people are supposed to be educated people. Now, it's been someone on Brother Tom's show explaining it to them, and Louis Colson has a specialist on languages on his show and on your show. But still, we got some people that just don't understand, and they're really saying that they're trying to teach our children a gutter language and all that. That's what some of the talk show hosts are saying here. And it shows that some of them, they don't have the right listening skills or something. They need to be taught how to take things and listen and analyze them, because it's just really something wrong. And it really lets us know a lot about these so-called leaders. See, this is not the first time that Jesse Jackson messed up. Remember, I know a lot of them out there remember the time when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was saying about dirty religion was being practiced, that the Jewish people wasn't practicing Judaism, they were practicing the dirty religion. He had not that only said the Jewish religion. He went on to say the other religions, when you practice a religion of lying and cheating and murdering, and Jesse Jackson denounced the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan without going to him and finding out what he really said. He was going by what the paper was saying. So this is not the first time we did that.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right, now I thank you for your call. And one of the there is confusion in the way that things are reported and in the way that things are stated, and sometimes we are victimized by people who do understand a particular issue but are not able to articulate the issue, are not able to articulate the issue even as well as they actually understand it. So there are people who are trying to explain some issues, explain some things, and even though they understand, sometimes it still gets, something still gets lost in the translation, and so that is part of our concern for trying to provide clarity. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Let me turn down the radio. I have been listening to this, and you know what? I think this is probably one of the most revolutionary things that have happened since the Civil Rights Movement.
Mm-hmm.
And if this thing really gets out there and people begin to understand that what you are doing is learning to understand information systems, which are done in standard English, as opposed to Ebonics, which we generally use in family and assembly settings, that you need to step back and look at that if you can understand and you can read and you can write and you can translate complex information, it opens up so many doors. And it's very complex. People really don't understand it yet. But I look at it and I say, this is really big. That's why it's so important for people to talk about it now. If you look out there and you say, oh, well, we need to start businesses. Oh, well, we need to get new leaders. But what we really need are a larger base of people who are able to translate complex ideas. And that's the best thing about the whole thing that has happened. I just love it. I think it's great. And I love this program. I really don't want to say a lot more. You know, I spoke to some people earlier. They were saying, hey, we got to talk about Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich got shoved to the side and the top of our minds, not because that wasn't important, but because this is really about translated information.
I'm glad that you said that, because there are people who feel that these issues come up as a distraction. We are dealing with the CIA and its involvement in drug trafficking.
We're still there.
And this issue comes up and people feel that this might be a distraction. I don't believe that it is a distraction. We have to be able to process more than one idea. You know, we have to be able to deal with the aggression against our people as it exists on more than one level. We cannot afford to deal with only one level of attack at a time. There are some of us who can deal and have been dealing for some time with this education issue. And this simply, if we turn this discussion into the direction it really should go, this Ebonics needs to be simply the discussion that opens the window on public education. And then we need to join all of those people who are already involved in struggling for quality education. Help move this whole issue forward with a further scrutiny of the public school system nationally. Then it will be of great value. The Oakland School Board has already voted. They're going to do this.
And I'd love to see it here in
so
Washington.
it is not even something that is up for debate. We have begun to debate it, but it is not as though the debate is going to change anybody's mind. They're going to do it. And Caller points out that Kwesi Mfume is going to write a letter asking that the funds not be set aside. I think that there will be enough of us writing letters in support of the Oakland School Board, helping them, and we'll find out from them as soon as we can reach someone from the school board. We will be talking to them as to how other people around the country can actually express their support. But this is already a done deal. What we need to now do is expand the conversation, as I said earlier, to a conversation that examines the larger implications of a failing or a low-performing public school system. And then we will really benefit from having raised, from the folks in Oakland having raised this issue, because you see, what they have done in Oakland is in a very real sense a political act. They have challenged the very process
of education
that has been denying black children adequate resources to be adequately educated.
Yes, and that's why I feel it is so tremendously important that we move forward with this thing, and that it is so revolutionary. Because, as you were saying, and as the other gentleman said, in the sense, you had the civil rights movement, but then you don't have the other side of that particular coin, the education side.
That's why we
That
need
is
to
one
do
thing to be free, and another thing not to know what to do with your freedom. Okay?
That's right.
You can't even climb the ladder. You can look there and say you're sitting there looking at the ladder, and you're paying attention to a coin.
And see, there you go. And see, we're not going to lose sight of any other critical issue. I'm dealing with this Ebonics issue here on Night Talk. I'm not going to deal with it every single night, but we're dealing with it now. And at the same time, and Reverend Sharpton has dealt with this Ebonics issue. Well, at the same time, Reverend Sharpton and I are going to bring Dick Gregory and Joe Madison back to New York City to Reverend Sharpton's new building for a rally on the CIA and the crack cocaine connection. We're not abandoning any effort. What we are doing is that we continue to expand our sphere of influence because that is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
I'm out of time.
All
right, now, thank you for your call. We'll be right back.
You're tuned into Information Radio. Night Talk with Bob Law continues after this. Denzel Radio Networks.
Is there a caller with me?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Go right ahead. Where are you calling from?
I am calling from Tampa, Florida. Dorothy Harmon, a 49-year teacher in Florida school system and holy. I am especially grateful to you, Bob, for pushing this. We looked at this problem at the beginning of integration, well, let's say years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We even had a couple of teachers whom I'm just pushing right now since I read that article about the Oakland school system, who wrote a book or were in the process of writing a book with regard to this, and I have asked them to join me, for I am now pushing the books and reading materials throughout the United States. I've just returned from Los Angeles, California, in which the Los Angeles Police Department has joined me with a task force in regard to this. However, my part is books and reading materials into all of the homes, and as a means of overcoming problems in the community. In other words, it says reading with understanding, a key to a crime-free community. And as a teacher, we met these problems of what we are now calling Ebonics, and teachers like Dorothy Harmon, who is still there, would put our arms around that student and calm him down and help him with his little language dialect and walk him into the real situation. And this is what we're investing our money and time with. And all I can say is thank you, Bob, for pushing it. Keep up. We, as retired teachers and those of us who've been there and knew what it took to keep that child from succumbing to the perils of poor discipline, we're going to keep on working on it. And I don't think too much could be said. Now, as for the upper crust you're talking about, they forgot the Paul Laurence Dunbar and the Langston Hughes, who, if they read their literature and their poems, they will see that if you call it Ebonic or whatever you want, but it is still some of the most beautiful language because it was for real. And the interpretation or the monies to now bring our children and scholars into the real world, the mainstream, hey, pour it on and let's help them get where they want to go. We're pouring money into sports, and what better language than our black or Ebonic sportsmen and how they ring those goals and make those touchdowns, which say, this is the language I speak, respect me. And that's all Oakland is saying. No, as I understood it, and I hope they're right, and in case they're not, they'll see me at their door, whether they're not or right, because we're all for this. And we are going to be contributed to it, because that retired teacher knows, especially if they've taught in an integrated situation, they know what it means to help one be understood. And so, as I say, overcoming language barriers without succumbing to the perils of poor discipline. Reading and speaking with understanding, a key to a crime-free community.
All right. All right, now, thank you for your call from Tampa.
Tampa, Florida.
All right, now,
Dorothy
thank you.
Harmon.
Thank you for calling Night Talk.
Sure.
All right,
You're
now.
welcome.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, Bob.
Hello.
I'm calling from the Bronx. I agree with all that you've said. One exception, Bob. I still think that this is a distraction, and I realize the importance of education as the foundation. But I believe, as Dr. Claude Anderson said, powernomics is important. And without the powernomics, which we began to get the foothold of, in realizing that we have to create our own institution, this Ebonics situation is nothing new. I believe that you're correct, that we have to understand the political realities that on a level of power economics, that we have to educate people that the system is what's at fault for undereducating our children. This has been the reality because of the discrimination and the inequality in this country, and I just believe that this is a covert attempt to distract us from the situations of the CIA's involvement, where in L.A. with the distribution of drugs, and Sister Maxine Waters is highly involved in trying to bring this to the forefront. So if we tie up the communication highways with something that is known, and this, as you said, is a done deal, we know that we have to move toward better educating the children. And if there's only one means of getting us emotionally struck, is to attempt to discuss our children, and we get emotionalized, and this disrupts the information, the flow of information on the information highway.
I got it. I got it.
Being put across.
But I think that it is incorrect from this perspective. What then do you say to the children? You're calling from New York City?
Yes, sir.
What then do you say to the children in New York City, as with the CIA issue, with right there? What do you say, however, to the children in the New York City public school systems who are being poorly educated? Do you say to them that we cannot address your need for a quality education because we've got a different issue, the crack and the CIA?
No.
Well, what do you say to them?
No, my point is...
No. I'm asking. The children in New York City's public schools are victimized precisely in the same manner as the children in Oakland.
Exactly.
Now, in Oakland, the school board has moved to do something about it, even though crack and the CIA is a major issue.
Right.
But they have not ignored the children in the public school system. Now, in New York City, there is no such initiative. What is being done to structure a quality education for the children in the New York City public school system, a public school system that has been described by the regents in New York as a low-performing school system that is failing to adequately educate the children? And so something is necessary in order to give those children a quality education. And
we have to provide the schools with the necessary tools to educate.
But who's doing that?
Okay.
Wait. Who's doing that?
Well, this is back to what you have.
Wait. What's the answer to who is doing that? You'd have to say nobody. And the people cannot afford.
I won't say nobody.
Okay, well then say who.
I believe that as parents of children, we're all responsible.
No, I'm not asking for who's
responsibility.
I'm not asking who's responsible. I'm asking clearly now, who is doing it?
Bob Law is doing it from the New York front. As often as need be, you have spoke about the curriculum of inclusion, as well as the need for the curriculum and curriculum of instruction.
All right. So now, wait a minute. If you keep, no, they didn't take my lead. They were doing it first. If you say Bob Law is doing it, so fortunately I'm Bob Law. So
correct.
I can say nobody is doing it. There's nobody helping me with that anymore. Wait a minute. Nobody is helping with that anymore. No, we're not doing it. The children are being neglected criminally. by activists and activism in New York City. There are still the educators who I met moving into that struggle who are still there struggling with it. The community in New York City didn't even raise enough money to pay for the class action lawsuit. All we got was lip service.
That's correct.
Nobody is doing anything near what should be done on behalf of these children. Now, there are some of course, there are some people who are working very hard, but the community has not made quality education for children the same kind of priority as discussing the CIA and its involvement in crack. And what I'm saying is that we have a need to do both with the same passion.
Simultaneously.
Wait.
Correct.
With the same passion.
Right.
So that if somebody attempts to distract us, it only becomes a distraction if you go for it. If you understand, I don't mean you personally, but if people understand that there is a need for a real movement to counter what the CIA is doing, and at the same time there is a need for a movement of equal enthusiasm and momentum to counter what the public schools are doing to our children. We can't afford not to deal with both of those. We can't afford to claim that one is a distraction because
I agree, Bob.
wait. Just consider this. Because I've heard this also about the CIA and the crack issue. We have heard that called a distraction. There are people who, when we began to talk about it, were saying, we've always known the CIA was dealing drugs. We've always known of their involvement. I think this is just a distraction to get us away from whatever else that particular person was interested in. The town hall forums, the meetings that we have put on, they have also been called a distraction. We were dealing with economic development, and we're moving forward on economic development, we're moving forward on political empowerment, and now a story appears in the white press on the CIA selling drugs in the black community, something we've always known. I think it's just a distraction. I've heard that on Night Talk. So there's a problem with any issue that is pertinent being dismissed by any one of us as a distraction away from some other issue. As a people, I believe we have to be able to process with enthusiasm more than one idea at a time.
I agree,
And
Bob.
the fact that you come over and spend some significant time with this education issue does not mean that you should stop spending significant time with the crack and the CIA issue. Both are important.
Equally important.
And so we should not allow either one to be either characterized or actually used as a distraction. See, one of the things that happens to us is that black people have become a little bit too comfortable with this idea that we can't think beyond one thought at a time. That's why if there are 3 black people who have worked very hard in the black community, and at the same time each of them decide they want to run for mayor, black people say 2 of y'all have to drop out because we are not competent enough to process all of the information and select the one of you that we want to support. See, black people pretend we can't process 3 ideas. 3 candidates, that's too much for our brain. We can't listen to what all 3 have to say and then pick the one. So to keep us from having to think critically, could 2 of you drop out so that we don't have to think hard enough to determine which of the 3 is the best choice, so that 2 of them have to defer their ambition, their goals, their career aspirations, because the black community is pretending that 3 is too much for us to think. That's the real insult to our intellect, where we are constantly being told that if another idea emerges, it becomes a distraction. Why is that? Are we some dummies that we can't think 2 things at the same time?
Oh, Bob, I don't want you to contradict yourself. I think that those of us who listen to the information highway and those who are interested, we are astute thinkers, we are analytical thinkers, and we are trying to be problem solvers. But I'm just mindful that mainstream media always takes the focus of our our discussion and change it to a tone whereby we start to indict each other. Now,
well,
Jesse Jackson...
Wait. I'm going to run out of time, but we're moving away from... The real concern is that mainstream media should not have that kind of power over your intellect. The fact that they put it out doesn't mean that we cannot see through it. And what I hear, as we've had some conversations here recently, we've had guests on who were part of that whole process of putting out what might be confusing information. And the thing that encourages me is how particularly the folks in the Night Talk audience respond to the efforts to confuse us. One of the things that we have indicated is that you can't trick us just by putting out two ideas anymore. So I disagree that it is even capable of being a distraction. The people who are easily distracted will be easily distracted no matter what happens. And so we cannot accommodate our movement we cannot fashion a movement that accommodates the weakest link in the chain. We have to be better than that, and I believe that we are. However, I'm now 5 minutes late. We have to break. We'll be right back. Hello, you're on the air.
We respect you here in Washington, D.C., even highly now, Dr. Law.
I respect you.
Yes, I'm calling the W.O. Washington. I'd like to get in the dialectic between Ebonics, and Ebonics being taken ebony, like the Ivonics, that'd be ivory. You know, in comparison, the caller from Tampa and your last caller hit upon a very interesting thing. I did some research on Paul Laurence Dunbar, and in 1893 he was talking the same way. He was speaking of dialect to Theodore Roosevelt and later to McKinley. And the same situation that you have happening now. If you read the life and times of Paul Laurence Dunbar, he made the point that you made so eloquently earlier. He said, now dialects are great. He said, but I write prose. And he said, the press only wants to deal with dialect. He said, however, the education, the same way that you've said it in a different way, he says the education is most important when the communication is set up based on English. Now, I like to give you an idea when I say juxtaposition, Ivoronics next to Ebonics. Now, here's the third verse of a very important jingle bell. Listen to the horse was lean and lank. Misfortune was our lot. We got into an open pit and we got upsot. U-P-S-O-T. Now, this is the old English slang song. But when you look in juxtaposition with Ivoronics next to Ebonics, you'll see what Paul Laurence Dunbar and what you've been saying has a very clear understanding of what you have said earlier. By that I mean, it hits upon the historic debate since 1883 because Paul Laurence Dunbar and the other scholars at that time and the people were in an agrarian society. And not many people understood what they're talking about, white, black, Chinese, or anybody. And they dealt with the same thing you just said. And go on and continue saying it, because I really enjoyed here in Washington, D.C. Keep hitting it the way you're saying it. It's not a put down of Jesse Jackson or anybody else, because you are hitting right upon the key. And it's an old debate, remember, since 1893. The life and times of Paul Laurence Dunbar puts it right in perspective. How you got it, I tell you something else. Have you ever read the book?
That particular book?
Yeah, but no. Well, you've read Life and Times of Paul Laurence Dunbar.
I don't know if I've read that particular book, but I've read about, of course, about Paul Laurence Dunbar.
Believe me, you picked it up beautifully, and I like to support everything you said historically, and I'll hang up and listen.
All right, now, I thank you for your call. There's a caller who called a moment ago and talked about the importance of ideas and of people dealing on the level of ideas. Hakeem Madabuti has said that ideas rule the world. The question is, whose ideas are we tap dancing to? Looking at a publication, a business publication called Fast Company, a magazine article in here that talks about someone who is developing new companies and doing it on the internet. And they say he turns ideas into companies. And I was thinking about that when the brother mentioned the significance of ideas and people able to operate from those ideas. Looking at a quote in this article that says, "Where are we going to find great people to execute our ideas?" That's our biggest challenge, indeed, as we talk about the challenges of the leadership into 1997, even before we get to the year 2000. Where are we going to find great people to execute our ideas? That's our biggest challenge. I'm Bob Law. This is Night Talk. Stay close.
1-800-326-2529 gets you on the information highway. 1-800-326-2529 is the number to the conversation line.
Hello, you're on the air. Hello, you're on the air. Hello. Hello. Hello, hello.
Hello?
Yes.
Have I reached the radio station?
Yes, you have. Where are you calling from?
Philadelphia.
Yes, this is Night Talk. Go right ahead.
Oh, well, I have a bad issue with this Ebonics thing. All of a sudden, this becomes a big issue. Wanting to teach, I want to know who's going to benefit from the teaching of black kids of the black language.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just say again, there's some misunderstandings. What they're proposing in Oakland is not to teach black English. That is not what is happening at all. Anyone who thinks that is simply misinformed. That is not at all what they are teaching. Let me read for, not the last time, but let me just read again the statement issued by the school board in Oakland. One sentence from the statement. What they have said real clearly, the goal is to give African American students the ability to have standard English proficiency in reading, writing, and speaking. They are not planning or not proposing to teach Ebonics. They are proposing to teach standard English and to set in place classes and instructors and resources like what is being done for Vietnamese students, Hispanic students, Polish students who are not speaking, reading, or writing standard English proficiently. When they come through the public schools in a short amount of time, those other students are able to master standard English. And the reason that they are able to do so is that a bilingual course of instruction is deliberately set in place to teach them proficiency in standard English. And what they have said is we must do the same thing for African American students who are also in need of very deliberate, specific instructions to give them proficiency in standard English. So they are not proposing to teach what is called black English. They are acknowledging, however, that this black English or
is
Ebonics,
a means of people learning.
No, and they're acknowledging that the Ebonics already exist. That
so let's use it.
No, not let's use it. That black kids are already speaking it, and so are black adults. And because so many black people are speaking it, it is very difficult for the students who come into the school to easily make the next step to standard English, because there's nothing in place to really teach them English as another language. So when they come to school and they say, she be doing it all the time. Well, when
someone else wants to know what that means.
When they go home, they hear their parents say that. They hear their relatives say it. They are surrounded by this linguistics form of communication.
Yes, but we're not. I was taught phonics in school.
But they're not teaching it anymore, is the point. See, what we're saying is that people have to go into these schools and see what's going on.
Yes.
They're not teaching it anymore. So these children, the point is this, it's no accident that we're talking about children who have been in school for 6 and 7 years
yes.
who can't speak standard English. What's the reason that after being in school for 6 or 7 years...
They're not being taught standard English.
And so since they're not...
So Ebonics is so that you can so that the teachers can understand what the black kids are saying, or...
No. What they have said simply is that a language form exists called...
That they don't understand.
All right, now, you want me to say these? Let me say it now. No, they're not saying that. They're saying that a language form exists that is so pervasive in the black community that it is actually a
dialect.
All right, no, I'm not going to chase it now. I'm trying to say this. A language form exists. It's more than a dialect. A language form exists that is so pervasive in the black community that it actually represents another language. And since it is so pervasive, it exists as an obstacle
to other people.
Why you keep trying to finish my statement?
Okay, go ahead.
It exists as an obstacle to the students in being able to easily learn standard English. Therefore, a bilingual class is necessary in order to teach them standard English. So somebody says, well, what is this other language that is an obstacle to learning standard English? And in Oakland said, it's Ebonics. And they said, and so they're not saying let's teach Ebonics. And y'all have to now begin to understand. See, now we get into a point where we cannot continue to tolerate all this misunderstanding. See, black folks, some of us, become too comfortable in our inability
to understand.
To understand.
And I want to understand.
Start to insist that our misunderstanding is the correct, is correct. Because, listen, you got to take the next step forward now and understand this, because the children are at stake. And black adults failing to understand are really damaging now to the future of these children. So what they have said, number one, understand Ebonics is not black English, it's not broken English, it is a real language system.
That is used among people that aren't necessarily Afro-American.
Okay, all right.
I'm asking a question.
Right. No, it is not used among people who are not necessarily Afro-American.
What is the focus on with the Ebonics? What are they focusing upon?
Okay, so I've already answered that. So if you're still asking that, you're not following. And and it's similar to what is happening with the children.
To teach this through all races are to learn this if they're in the public school system.
No,
is that correct?
No, that is absolutely wrong.
Or is it to help the teachers in order to better relate to the children?
It is, again now, you have to try to understand this. It is not to teach anybody Ebonics. It simply says they're not teaching Ebonics. There's no instructions. There's nothing about teaching Ebonics. Put that out of your mind.
Yes.
There's nobody proposing to teach Ebonics to anybody. Got that?
Yes.
Now look how you said that. See, you don't want to let it go. You thought you understood it. Now your ego won't let you admit you misunderstood. You don't even want to let it go.
I misunderstood certain...
No, you misunderstood all of it.
Okay.
They are not teaching Ebonics and are not proposing to teach Ebonics.
Right.
What they have said is that there is a language, and they have called it Ebonics.
Yes.
And because of this language that is being spoken pervasively in the black community, the children come into the schools speaking the same language and only know that way of communicating because nobody has taught them standard English. So children come into the schools and they say, they be making a lot of noise in the hallway, or she been gone, she been gone. But when they say she been gone, the children mean, and the people who say that mean that she has been gone a long time.
Yes.
Right? Now, but those children, when you say to them in a different classroom, in a music class, a science class, whatever, she been gone. Somebody might say, what happened to little Mary Jackson who sits right next to you? The little kid says, she been gone. Well, what the teacher says is, no, that's just crazy, that's ignorant, that's wrong. You don't say it like that.
But he means something when he says that.
Yes, but the reason that he said it is that he has not been taught standard English. And just chastising him or correcting him in a casual manner when he uses the language incorrectly will not correct it. In order to correct the language, truly competitive in this society, they must be proficient in standard English at each level. That's what the Oakland School Board has said. And so what they want to do is teach the children standard English proficiency in reading, writing, and speaking. Is that clear? What they have said is that there is a method, there are other groups of people who also cannot speak standard English. And generally it is people who come to this country speaking another language. And so for them, English is a second language. So there are people who come to this country, the Vietnamese, they talk about, perhaps there's a Vietnamese population out on the West Coast, and in fact there is. And they say that there are people who come to the country who in a shorter amount of time, after spending a couple of years in the school system, are speaking standard English more so, better than African American students. And the reason for that is that there is a bilingual class put in place. There is over $200 million in Title VII funds that is set aside, if you will, for Hispanics and Asians to teach them standard English as a second language. There is no money set aside for teaching African American children standard English. And so the reason that other people are able to achieve proficiency in standard English is not because they are smarter, is not because they have a better home environment, but because there is a bilingual program in place in the school system to teach them standard English, operating from the premise that they need to be taught English as a second language because they have a barrier to speaking English when they arrive here, that barrier being their own native tongue. So since they cannot speak English, they need to be taught how. What the Oakland School Board has said is that these African American children also are not speaking standard English and have never been instructed in all of the years in the schools. They have never been instructed as to how to speak standard English. There exists in the African American community, and this is the part that people find embarrassing. There exists in the African American community a language, a linguistic form, and they have named it Ebonics, but whatever you want to call it, there exists in the African American community a linguistic communications form that comes out of the very real historical experiences of black people. When black people, the slaves were taught, see, black Africans were taught, Africans in America were taught English by ignorant white folk. People who would say here instead of here. You know, people who would say, have made up all kinds of things that they said. They said, y'all, they said, I don't even know all of the things. They spoke broken English. They said, been done gone. And so black folk, for whom it was illegal to educate, still had a need to communicate. So they began to speak a language, a kind of English, a kind of colloquial expression that is the synthesis of what they remembered from their own native tongues and how they were being taught English. And then they were the victims of a poor education system for many, many, many years, on up into 1996. And out of that experience has come a linguistic style. And for many of these children, that's all they know. But that is not enough. They cannot survive. They cannot communicate and compete effectively with this Ebonics as a means of writing, speaking, and reading. They cannot be competitive. And so the Oakland School Board has said, given the historical realities that which include a pitifully poor educational system, given the historical realities, we have got to develop an educational system that is based on the realities of the communities that it serves. And one of the realities is that these African American students have never been taught standard English. They are not speaking broken English because they are negligent, or because they don't want to speak English, or because they embrace some other kind of value system, they have never been taught. And what they said in Oakland is that there's no mystery as to how to teach standard English. You have been doing it effectively with Asians, with Hispanics, with Vietnamese, with Europeans, with French, with Polish, any group of people who have come into this country have, through the bilingual educational processes set in place in the public school system, been taught to speak standard English. We know how to do this. We do not need to continue to fail black students. We know how to do this. And the same process that is used, the same bilingual educational process or methodology, the same system that is used to teach all other groups standard English ought to be used to teach these black children as well. We will no longer tolerate a system or a society where the resources, the money, the expertise, the methodology will be put in place for every group except ours. And then you will say to us that we must somehow compete nonetheless. We refuse to see over $200 million in Title VII funds set aside for bilingual programs and not include the needs of African American students in that process. So we want to put in place a bilingual program that recognizes that these African American children need to be taught standard English as though it were a second language. Let's begin with them, acknowledging that they have not been taught, that they have a barrier and a language obstacle, and that language obstacle is the language that they have been taught. Now we need to not assume that they are just ignorant, not assume that they just don't want to learn, not assume that they are just negligent, and we just scold them and denigrate them and talk bad about them because of the way they talk. But instead, we will put in place a bilingual program that will teach them standard English proficiency, the same way you teach everybody else who needs to learn standard English as a second language. These children, middle-class black folk, like it or not, need to be taught English as a second language. They are speaking what can be called a language because it's all they know. And there is something correct about it, as is the case with all of these colloquial languages, colloquial expressions. If you want to say, she's been gone a long time, you say, she been done gone. Well, if you were to say to some of those children, say that in standard English, they cannot. They've never heard it in standard English. They've never been taught standard English. And what the Oakland School Board has said, given that this linguistic form is so pervasive and has such a tradition and history in their environment and has so many forms of communication, so many expressions of communication, it in effect is another language whether we like it or not. And because it exists very much as a language, we need to take the people who speak this language and teach them in a bilingual program standard English as though we were talking or as though we were teaching someone who we acknowledge has no knowledge of the language because they speak some different language. These young people are speaking a different language. It's not slang. It is a linguistic communications system. And so what they have called for is to teach through a organized process African American students the same way this system, this public school system, teaches any other group of people who have a need to learn English as a second language. And I know there are some people who just don't want to admit that some of us have a need to learn English as a second language. Hold on, we'll be right back. Now, this is we will probably have to talk about this again, but just to kind of sum up. Ebonics does not mean to teach Ebonics. It simply gives a name to a linguistics communication system that is quite pervasive in the African American community, particularly among people who are the victims, in a very real sense, of a historically inadequate educational system that has worsened in the last decade. So you have children now who are coming up through newly segregated schools. See, in the old days of segregation, the teachers were also black. And there were teachers who had a commitment to developing the minds of their students. In this renewed segregation, see, the public schools in New York City are segregated. They are very much black, and then in other parts of town, white. But the teachers in the black schools are no longer all black. The principals are no longer all black. And so the attitude in these newly segregated schools is not the same attitude that existed many years ago and on up to the desegregation, the desegregating of public schools in 1954. But prior to that, the segregated schools, segregated though they were being staffed by black teachers who themselves were being segregated, but had a very different commitment to the children. So coming out of these all-black schools now, you have children who are being, whose education is being sabotaged. So we have children who cannot speak standard English, and they must now begin to speak, read, and write in standard English. And the Oakland School Board has taken some very specific steps to guarantee that the children will be taught standard English by voting in a bilingual program that acknowledges that Ebonics is pervasive in the community and exists like a language, and as such becomes an obstacle to speaking, reading, and writing standard English. And so a special bilingual program must be put in place in order to teach African American children standard English, because the current system, while it teaches every other group with the same need standard English, continues to fail African American children by pretending that when it is time to address the educational needs of African American children, there is some mystery that no one can solve, and we just don't know what to do. It is a vicious cycle. And as a result of the vicious cycle, the schools don't work, the parents are not involved, the community is in trouble, there's high unemployment, and the school system pretends that we can't quite put our finger on where to apply the pressure, or where to apply the acupoint to relieve the pressure. We just don't know what to do. In Oakland, they have said, yes, you do know what to do. You do the same thing that you have done for every other group who has the same need. That is why there's over $200 million in Title VII funds in the federal government's education budget for bilingual education, to teach other groups standard English. And you have done so effectively. You will do the same thing now with African American students. When the children graduate from these schools in Oakland now, they will graduate with a proficiency in standard English, something that is currently not happening, the way that the problem is, or the challenge is being addressed. Now, you all understand that. They have not said lower any standard. They have said instead to create a process based on our successful experience with the same challenge when we are dealing with other ethnic groups. Use that same perfected process now for African American students as well. And somebody says, well, what is the other language that they speak? We'll call it Ebonics. And so now they have a need to be taught English. Start from square one and teach English. Teach them to speak standard English like you do everybody else. And that's what they have agreed to do. I believe it is a good idea. And they have also said we will stop denigrating the children who speak this other form, because we understand the historical environment that produced this other form. And we've seen it in other groups without them being denigrated. People just laugh at the way other people have these little broken English expressions. But it is never called broken English. You know, it's never called Italian English. It's never called Jewish English. It's never called Vietnamese English or Hispanic English. It's not at all. All of those kinds of terms to give it a more demeaning characteristic are set aside for black folk only. And in Oakland, they have said, we're not going for that any longer. We will not be denigrated. We will not be embarrassed. We will not be considered ignorant because of this linguistic style. It was a style that evolved out of our experiences in this country, in a particularly hostile social environment. This is how many of us speak. And if you were to put anybody's children in these public schools, they'd all speak like that. That's what they say in Oakland. So we have a need to fix it. And this process is set in place to guarantee that the black children who graduate from inner city schools will no longer graduate as functional illiterates. So you've got some hypocrites who are spreading the wrong information and are suggesting that their concern is quality education, while they have tolerated one graduating class after another of young people who are best described as functional illiterates, graduating from school without their very special need being addressed, and as a result cannot read, speak, or write proficiently in standard English, and nobody said a word. None of the people who are complaining on talk radio ever said a word, ever really fully supported the initiatives underway in a number of cities by community advocates to upgrade and upgrade the quality of public education. Can't get on the radio, can't get interviewed consistently about this issue, and can't get the talk show host to raise the issue on their own. Now they say that they are concerned about low standards when they have tolerated low standards all the lives of these children, and have now begun to incorrectly critique the effort in Oakland to fundamentally upgrade the standard. Now, hopefully that's clear. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I'm calling in response to your discussion on the Ebonics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that the California School Board is putting it out has got the wrong perspective on it. And I don't think it's more of a second language. I think it's more of an unintelligent language. And it's just the kids are growing up and not being corrected when they misspeak. And I have a disagreement with it being compared with the second language as Vietnam or Spanish.
Yeah, I know, but here's the point. We really don't care about that any longer. We really don't care about how some black folk are embarrassed by the historical realities that shape our experience. We cannot afford to have these children continue to graduate from schools functional illiterates. Whether or not you want to compare it to another language is of no concern. What's of a concern is that a process must be put in place to teach these children standard English proficiency so that they will no longer graduate from the schools functional illiterates. That is what is happening. The children are suffering because there's some black folk who are embarrassed by the realities that exist in the black community. This Ebonics, as it is called, is pervasive in black communities to the point where it operates like a second language. And I know that embarrasses some middle-class black folk, but so what? These children are the people who are suffering. Now, we really cannot afford to suffer anymore we just can't afford this any longer, where black folk are still wallowing in denial, and the children can't afford y'all anymore, is the real deal. They must be taught to be proficient in standard English, and currently they are not being taught. There's not a discussion of any value about if I think it's a language or not. Who cares? The children are not being taught, and they must be taught. Other people come into this country and cannot speak standard English. After going through a bilingual educational process, they are able to speak, read, and write standard English with a proficiency far beyond what African American children are getting in the same public school system, because the bilingual program is not there for them, so we must put it in place for them. I care less about how someone else wants to characterize the language. That's really not a concern. Whether or not these children are going to be able to communicate and read effectively enough to survive and to become competitive in the 21st century, that is the real issue. All right, we have to break. We'll be back in a minute.
Night Talk.
Let me just see if we can help with that a little bit more. The brother says that it is a form. It's not a language, and I know that it embarrasses people, but however, and he says it comes from people just not being corrected when they speak incorrect English. All right, do you understand that what the Oakland School Board has said is that we want to put in place a bilingual program that will correct them in a structured manner with a curriculum on the level of curriculum and instruction. We will correct their misuse of standard English. What else could you want? They have not been corrected up to now. It's not that they have not been corrected at home. Understand this, y'all. Talking about Ebonics. Understand this. We're talking about students, children in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, right? These are children. If they're in the 6th grade or the 7th grade or the 8th grade, it means that they have been in school for 6, 7, and 8 years. And in that 7-year time, in that 8-year time, in that 6-year time, they have not been taught standard English. How is it possible that we're talking about people, young people, who have been in schools for 8 years, and after 8 years, they are not speaking standard English? It means that they are not, as the brother said, they are not being corrected. But it is not a failure simply in their home, where there are other people who are not capable of correcting them. It's where they hear the language repeated. But in the very schools where they have been for 6 years or 7 years or 8 years, they have never been adequately corrected, instructed. There has been a failure on the level of curriculum and instruction in teaching these children standard English. What the Oakland School Board says is, let us correct that failure. And in the environment that we control, the schools, because we do not control the environment in the home. In the environment that we control, let us implement a program on the level of curriculum and instruction that will teach these children standard English, that will correct what needs to be corrected. Now, if you are saying that you think there's some failure in terms of how they have been instructed, and when they speak wrong English, they just haven't been corrected, then what more could you want? then a bilingual program that will quite deliberately, systematically, structurally correct it. Hello, you're on the air.
I'm calling in regard to what you just talked about. I understand what you're saying, and I do agree. Yes, we definitely do need the program, but the gentleman that just called a few minutes ago, I understand where he's coming from. I've been a second-class citizen for a long time. I'm a young adult, and I've seen it happen. I've seen the conversations that the young people are having, and I know that there's a difference. I mean, I work in the community, and I'm able to kind of break down myself and give that conversation and even talk, you know, hey, what's up, where you got to go, all that kind of stuff. But on a mind situation, these kids are advanced. My black children here in America are far advanced, and we're not saying that we don't want what they're giving them, because everybody take that. If that's what they have to correct what needs to be done, then take it. But it's all the way across the board. Just basics need to be taught. I don't care if you want to call it bilingual or whatever. Basics need to be taught straight across the board, because when you get really down to it...
But wait a minute. I don't want to change the subject. A lot of people on the board. There's no question that basics need to be taught. The education movement in this country, in the African American community, has already made that point, and the English is only one component that we are dealing with now. There is no question and no need for any further discussion as to whether or not basics need to be taught straight across the board. That is the reason that a group of students here in New York City with me filed a class action lawsuit against the entire New York State public school system, saying that fundamentally, the entire curriculum, from kindergarten through 12th grade, every single subject being taught needs to be fundamentally restructured, redeveloped, upgraded, because on every level, it is a low-performing school system that is sabotaging the intellectual development of African-American children.
Right, but
that's already been established. We don't need to waste any time. Some of this is some feel-good stuff where people say, I'm going to save my analysis. My analysis is here. That analysis is 50 years old, or at least 30 years old. People have been struggling struggling with public schools for years and years and years. We can document for at least 30 years here in New York State. We've known for at least 3 decades that the quality of education needs to be fundamentally upgraded. And the people who control the educational process have consistently fought against that and have always limited the improvement of public schooling as it exists in inner cities. What they said in Oakland is, here is another weapon, another strategy that we will use to wrestle some of the sabotage out of the hands of the people who are sabotaging the system. Y'all don't need to go someplace else with a different whole angle or different aspect. Stay focused. We're trying to help people understand this Ebonics issue. Stay with that issue, though. Hello, you're on the air.
Okay. Staying with that issue, I feel that along with this, we have to understand that the motivation, the feelings that are within the children have to come to play. I know that what is going on needs to be changed, but you have to remember that we still have to adjust their minds into leadership roles. All of our children are leaders.
All right. This is Night Talk. Hello, you're on the air.
Good morning, Bob Law. You know, as I listened to Black Talk Radio in the last couple of weeks, I got a better understanding of Ebonics than when it was first thrown out in mass media. You know, because the first thing was like, oh, they was going to teach them this, you know, misinformation.
Right.
Then as you listen to it, like I was watching Politically Incorrect, and Coolio was on there the other night, and when they came out with that statement, he said to them, he said, if you are taught them correct English from when they was in preschool, you wouldn't have to teach them it. No, first the man said, oh, well, they're not learning They should be learning. He said, no, they're not learning. And he said they wasn't learning. He said, let's put aside Ebonics. He said they wasn't learning anyway. But if you had taught them correct from preschool to now, you wouldn't have that problem, you know. And, you know, he spoke on the fact, he said it wasn't like he was for or against it. He said, but anything that can teach them the English, the math, the science, whatever's for the best of them, to do it. And I think what a lot of our people come with the concept, they come with the concept of people feel that what we speak is not a language because they're going with the European way of talking what is a language. When you go into the bilingual thing, I always tell people that I believe bilingual should be the fact that every child should be taught another language from preschool on, so that the other kids, those who speak Spanish, we teach them English fine. If they want to take another language, it's fine. I feel other kids who speak English should be offered the option from preschool to have another language. You know what I'm saying? So we don't have this separation when you look in the papers. Sometimes they only asking for a person with bilingual skills to get a particular job. And sometimes we have the qualification, but we don't have that bilingual skill. And I see that's another role that should, you know, also be done. But I feel that if this is what's going to help the children, and then a lot of people like to say, oh, well, they should get their help at home. There are kids who was raised in homes where their mothers couldn't read, but they was doing a better job in the public schools where the kids learned to read from the public schools. So even if their parents couldn't read, they sometimes come home and teach their parents how to read, you know?
Absolutely.
So I believe that, well, us getting better information from Black Talk Radio has helped a lot of us understand it better than what the mass media was presenting. This way, when we talk to someone else, we can pass off the correct information and stop being ashamed. Why is the people so ashamed and you know, like they're ashamed, like...
See, I think that that's what is happening. The media is taking advantage of the fact that there are people who are just embarrassed. People who are ashamed. They don't want to admit that this Ebonics, as it is called, is pervasive. So much so that it could actually be labeled a second language. There are people who are embarrassed by that. That's what the brother was saying. That I'm really embarrassed. I don't want to admit that this thing exists so much so in my community that it could be characterized as another language. So I don't like the Oakland School Board acknowledging so publicly that this second language, that this method of communication is so pervasive in our community that it can be characterized as a second language, because we've been covering that kind of stuff up effectively. We've been coming across as a lot of things have been eliminated from our experiences. A lot of things have been eliminated from our repertoire, if you will, as we have become more and more mainstream. And now here comes the Oakland School Board acknowledging publicly that this linguistic style is pervasive enough to be called the second language. And we thought we had fooled white folk, you know, that we are, none of this exists anymore. Well, the fact is that it does. And that if we continue, and as I say, the thing that irritates me is there are people who are sounding like they have a concern for quality education. But if I do a education rally in New York City, which I have done, I couldn't get announcements on those same talk shows making the community aware of the rally that are now expressing some concern for upgrading the standard of public education. There are people who are pretending, I'm saying there are people who are pretending that they are really committed and concerned about quality education, because when we came with some very specific educational challenges that they could have helped inform the community about, you couldn't get on those shows. I mean, you have never heard Atim Sentwali on the Kiss Morning Show. As much as he has been involved in this education struggle in Mount Vernon, we have shut down schools. We have he has brought it and done some research and brought an investigation into the finances of the Mount Vernon school system that got into the New York Times feature article. Can't get on Black Talk Radio, however. And then we've got some folk who are talking who are suggesting that they have a concern for standards, but it just irritates me. I just feel like it is hypocritical.
And they don't know really what is the criteria that specific makes something a language. See, that's what it is. Right. They figure that if it's Spanish or French, that makes it a language. If they looked at it, they would see that. But thank you anyway.
All right, I thank you for your call. And again, you are correct. There are people who they do not know what makes it a language, but even more so, what people are really saying is, let's not call this a language. To call it a language embarrasses me. You know, it is, I don't want anybody to know that this linguistic system or style exists to the extent that it does in the black community. See, I want the people who speak like that to be seen as some children of a lesser God, some ignorant little black kids over here, not my kids, and not me, and not my family, not my circle. That's them little ignorant Negroes over here who do that. We can't deny that that is how they speak, but we can put some distance between us and them. But if you say it's a language that exists within the black community, then it means that there may be others in even my own family somewhere who speak like that. And I certainly don't want white folk to know that. That's really what that first emotional reaction is. That is the reason that even after you explain it clearly, there are people who are saying, I hear you, and I can't disagree with that. But there's got to be something that I can disagree with because I have a need to send a signal to whites that it's not me. That's these other black folk. Lord help them. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, peace, brother. We respect you in Philadelphia, sir.
I respect you. There's a real hum on your phone.
Yeah, I just knocked it off.
I can't hear you.
Oh.
You need to call back. See if you can get in on another line.
All right, brother.
All right. Hello, you're on the air.
How you doing, Bob Law?
Good.
This is one evening I will say I think I'm understanding history, or history is being made right before my very ears. You have eloquently explained that anyone can understand, black or white, educated or absolutely has not gone to school at all, what the Ebonics issue is all about. This is a correction of the misdeeds done to blacks specifically in the educational system.
That's right.
Even though it may be a first step, we must come out from being ashamed as if we've been put on some, or allowed to be on some level, and how dare we look down and say, well, I am going to critique how it is making me look. What it is doing, it is exposing that white people that have allowed this to go on are corrupt against black people specifically, and black people that have been allowed to critique or think, because I jumped to conclusion when I first heard it. I said, they have caved in. They're gonna teach this slang as a, and you know what? This isn't slang. These people are actually living this day in, day out, and are going to be doing so for the next 20, 30 years because they were taught by their parents who were now teaching their children. Like, it's like what Ronald Reagan did. All they needed was a couple of generations, and they have totally taken the pitchfork for what educational skills we did have, unearthed them, and said, we're going to start all over again. You all are just like you just came here right off the boat. And I abhorred that. It's like that Willie Lynch letter. Just keep them going consistently for about a year, giving them no breaks, because we have a relentless enemy in this country. And we have blacks that are now taking the charge and taking the bandwagon, taking the flag, and that's why you have black-on-black crime. You don't have to have whites come in your neighborhood and kill you. They've got us doing it for them. So what I'm saying right now, I see an absolute correction. I am in praise of what you've just done with the Oakland. I saw that woman on television. I give her all the praise in the world. And God bless her. God bless you. If there's anything I can do on a local level just to explain to people, I will do so. I thoroughly understand the situation. We are under attack, always have been. I am not ashamed to say that if I'm a second-class citizen, I am a second-class citizen only because I have been put in that situation, but I am truly first class.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Chicago, Illinois.
All right, now we have to break, but that is a good point. You see, when you say that I think what people are missing is that these children and others who are speaking what is being called Ebonics, it's not like they had a choice, standard English or Ebonics.
Yes.
And because they are lazy, they just chose to do Ebonics because it is easier. They never had a choice.
Can I just say one thing?
They have never been, their need for English proficiency has never been addressed on the level of curriculum and instruction. They have been in school for 8 years and still can't speak standard English. Are you with me?
Yes, I am. This will show the country and your listening audience tonight that discrimination, racism has now been exposed. Can't you see it when you open the door and you can see how the hate, the deception, the deceit, the cover-up, like Johnny Cochran was telling his jury. It was like you were talking to me like I was a jury. He said, stop the cover-up. Don't go along with the cover-up.
That's right.
You will go another generation, another year, another month, another day.
No, you got it.
Believing you're getting something, you're getting nothing. Richard Riley, how dare that dog.
No, you
and
got it.
Clinton, that lowlife.
All right.
To go on and say, we're not going to fund this. Of course it's become a second language. What else can it be now? The point of it is that, of course, it's incorrect. We know this. We know this. And they don't want any federal money. He came out immediately, it will not be funded. I said, how dare you? How do you expect us to get anything off of the ground when money is the engine in this country? You need money to fund this. And if we can fund this through our own federal dollars, I am all for self-help.
See, understand this. When Clinton says we won't fund it, he is simply being consistent with the right-wing federal agenda that says we will not put any money into any program that will be of benefit to African Americans. That's all. That is all he is doing. He is remaining consistent while he is appointing some individual black folk to his cabinet. It has absolutely no impact on the overall quality of life or the overall possibilities for the larger black community. So he will put a black woman on his cabinet, but then will be consistent with the policy of making sure that the only money that will come from the federal government into black folk is the salary of the black folk on his cabinet, the black folk on his staff. But the bilingual educational process that is available for other ethnic groups in this country, according to Clinton, will not be made available to black students who are in the same need of that special attention in terms of bilingual education. I've got to go.
Yes.
All right, now, I thank you for your call. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, how you doing, Bob?
Good.
All right, listen, I just wanted to thank you for keeping us on target in terms of making sure we understand what the real issue is.
All right, but there's a real problem with your phone.
All right, still got the problem.
Yeah.
All right, I'll catch
All right now. Okay. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. Bob?
Yes.
Much respect to you, brother.
Turn your radio down.
Yes, sir, I turned it off so I can hear you.
Yes, sir.
What I wanted to say was I was successful at obtaining a final call this week, and there was an article on the Ebonics. And of course I was pretty clear on what it was anyway, because I heard your program, I heard Malefi Asante, and I knew which side of the issue I was on in the first place. But the thing is, now, for those who want to go in depth and really understand the complete issue, it might be useful to pick up a final call. That'll give you a thumbnail sketch. But there'll be some information there about Geneva Smitherman's book, which will really lead to a thorough understanding of the issue, or some peripheral issues surrounding that. Of course, if you really want to understand it, I guess you would have to get a hold of whatever resolution they signed when they voted Ebonics in that region.
So what we're going to do, though, as other people have done, is to get people from the Oakland School Board. I'm leaving another note for my producers. I should have had somebody from the Oakland School Board by now, and so we'll press that. See if we can't get someone to come in and answer any additional questions. But at this point, it ought to be clear enough. I think
You've done well.
I think that where we are now is no longer confusion, but denial. I think now people are responding to their own personal biases and their own need for a certain kind of denial. And as I said earlier, the children, we just can't afford this stuff any longer. We just can't afford some of these attitudes in the African American community. There's not a way to eliminate them all at one time, but I think that what we do need to do is start to, as Elijah Muhammad had said many years ago, we need to begin with the believers first. People who begin with the believers, people who understand, people who are ready to move forward. The progressive thinkers that we talked about here in Night Talk a couple of years ago. Let's get busy. We can't spend too much time. We can't, not even too much. We can't spend any more time in meaningless debates with people who are simply willing to sacrifice the futures of our children in order to protect some illusionary status they would like to have in the overall society. We just can't deal with that. I mean, it's enough. No more foolishness from anybody.
You're right.
But I'm out of time.
Yes, sir.
All right, now, where are you calling from?
This is Gerald Reynolds calling from Detroit.
From WCHB.
Yes, sir.
In Detroit. All right, now, I thank you for your call. We'll be right back. We're on the air.
Pablo, how you doing? I respect you.
I respect you.
And I like your style. Pablo, I was just listening to you. I mean, you made it extremely clear about Ebonics. Mm-hmm. And you was covering an issue in reference to how it started off as far as the children in school.
Mm-hmm.
I got my radio on. I can hear myself talk. It's distracting me. You made a point in reference to that they teaching the other students, the Asian students, and then you have to break this down like this in order to get the monies or get the curriculum or whatever it might take, as Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. I definitely agree with that. But you hit on a key issue, and I know you covered it because you're one of the best. I was just sitting there listening to you, and I was thinking, if they created a scenario like that, removing some of the teachers over a period of time, removing the black teachers out of the schools and bringing the Caucasian teachers in, that's all by plan, isn't it?
Absolutely. I was looking at some statistics earlier today that we had distributed when we were starting this whole education initiative around the class action lawsuit that looked at how teachers are systematically being moved around from, not really being moved around, the teachers do it in agreement. Nobody is pushing them.
Right.
They agree to these to move, but they're moving into suburban schools. And there's a different kind of attitude on the part of many of the teachers. Now, there are schools in the inner city where there are black and white teachers who are really trying against enormous odds to do a good job. And the enormous odds, however, is not the community. But they are in schools where they don't have textbooks. The textbooks in New York City schools, a city controller pointed out a few years ago, were 30 years old. Now, if you have a textbook that's 30 years old,
it's obsolete.
You know what I mean?
Sure it is.
And so, but you've got science classes without any science equipment. You've got music classes without instruments and without a music teacher. You've got no extracurricular programming. There's no after-school, any kind of creative program that exists in the schools. You've got children who are in the 5th grade who are reading at a 3rd grade level. It's not because they are incapable of reading at a 5th grade level. They are being taught at a 3rd grade level.
That's correct.
And so you have a public educational system that is deplorable, where the educators like Diane Ravitch and Arthur the man who's the head of the American Federation of Teachers, always forget his name, and Arthur Schlesinger Jr., and Irene Impalazzeri here in New York City, any number of people, some of whom are black, who argue that it is impossible to teach the children because we can't put our hand on where the problem is. It's a vicious cycle. Well, what they have said in Oakland is, you are lying. It is not what they have said in Oakland with this Ebonics issue. They have said that you are lying. It is not a vicious cycle. It is not a mystery. There is a way that you can educate these children.
Sure.
We know that the process exists because we are seeing it being used by other ethnic groups with the same need.
Right in front of your eyes.
And so we are going to use the same methodology for our children. It's as simple as that. And I believe that, because see what they are doing, though, in a very real sense, they are confronting, as you pointed out earlier, they are confronting the resistance that is also pervasive within the public school systems. There is a resistance to improving the quality of education. For example, any recommendation that educators have made for improvement here in New York State has been rejected. It has been rejected by Diane Ravitch, for instance. When the curriculum of inclusion is proposed, Diane Ravitch says no. Well, Diane Ravitch doesn't live in New York City, doesn't have any children in the public school systems, and as an educator. And so none of her children, or none of the children of her kith and kin, are at stake.
Are being affected.
They are not, their futures are not even at stake, depending on whether or not her judgment is correct. Only African American children, Latino children, are at stake based on the judgment of Diane Ravitch. Now, why is it that anyone would continue to consider Albert Schenger or Diane Ravitch or Arthur Schlesinger Jr. or Irene Impalazzeri as people who are knowledgeable about how to educate children under their watch, during their tenure, their entire career as an educator? We have seen the quality of public education steadily decline. They have rejected any proposal that anyone has ever made for upgrading the quality of education, and they have failed to produce an effective program of their own. And still, educators who are white go to these educational failures and ask them to evaluate a proposal being offered by a group of black and Latino and Asian scholars who have developed an idea. They called it the curriculum of inclusion. It makes no difference what they call it. Then somebody else comes along and says, we want to set up a Malcolm X Academy in Detroit. We want to set up a school. We think that we have a way to reach these young boys particularly. They have a real problem. We admit to their problems. But we think that we have a way to reach them. We think that we can correct that. Here comes the same failed educators riding into Detroit. No, that won't work. Nah, that's not right. And so they resist. They can even get the American Civil Liberties Union and some white women's organizations to sue to block the creation of the Malcolm X Academy. However, they do not come with a different idea. They simply reject any idea that we are proposing while under their watch, the quality of education in public schools in the inner city all over the country continue to decline. I maintain that to continue to ask Diane Ravitch her opinion on any education issue is to deliberately sabotage the quality of public education.
God have to agree. If she's constantly doing it, couldn't do nothing but agree. Another couple of points that you hit on. I like the fact that the way you get to points and say that's been discussed and we're wasting time. I wish I could incorporate that right here in my immediate area. But although I have a great radio station, but I still like that. I mean, it seems like you did your research, you did your homework. When you're talking, you're going in a positive direction and you're not going backwards. I must admit, I really admire that.
Well, I thank you very much. We've got to hurry.
I'm calling from Philadelphia. Thank you.
All right, now, thank you for your call. We'll be right back.
Information Radio. You're tuned into Night Talk, a coast-to-coast exchange of opinions impacting the African American community. Night Talk returns in a moment.
The conversation lines are open and loaded. I'm going to try to get everybody on. And we just got up on the internet, and I've got a lot of messages in here from December, from December 29th, December 30th. I can't get on here now until about 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every time we try to get on, we get the line is busy. So there are a lot of people who have left messages. It's not that you are being ignored. I haven't been able to even look at these messages before. And where are we right now? There's a message from the 8th. Oh, that's right now, right? Wednesday morning, where we are right now. Maybe I can check in there, see what it is. And at the same time, take your phone calls at 1-800-326-2529. You've raised some questions about Black Talk Radio and the information that is getting out on Black Talk Radio. And, you know, Black Talk Radio is really very, very important. And it has enormous potential. And it needs to be nourished, developed fully. Needs to be more than adequately supported. There are people who say that Black Talk Radio is under attack, and indeed it is. Of course it is. I need to talk a little bit about that because I know my concern is how the African American community responds to the aggression against that community. And so I want to talk a little bit about Black Talk Radio. See if I can do that in a minute. A lot of people that are on the phones, I want to give you a chance to join this conversation also. You have the phone number, right? 1-800-326-2529. A lot of other things I was trying to get to, but I can tell by the phones that y'all not going to let me talk about these other 3 or 4 ideas. We're going to be dealing with Ebonics, I can see. For the rest of this conversation, there's some other things I want to talk about. Maybe we can get to it tomorrow. And I want to tell you that we've made some decisions about Agenda 2000. Do we have a date, though? I'll get a date from Linda Horton, from Linda tomorrow, about the date. I believe the date here is May 8th through the 11th. As we go to Bracco Village Resort in Jamaica, we have discovered a really fine black-owned resort. And registration begins Monday. So for everybody who is saying that you're going to go, now registration begins Monday, and let me see from Linda's note, we have to have 30% of the total registration completed by January 31st. And they need an initial deposit from everybody, and that would give us 30% of the total already in by January 31st, and then everybody's total balance will be due April 15th. Y'all making notes of this? But I'll give you all of the information tomorrow. It's going to be really nice. This time, for, ordinarily, the fee, it comes out to around the same fee every year. It comes out to about, this time it comes out to about $550 minus airfare. Airfare depends on where you fly from and how early you make your reservations. So we can't give you a figure, but Linda can give you some samples of airfare from New York, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, Baltimore, from whatever city you were in. She can tell you what it will cost for the airfare, depending on, and that's and including she'll give you the overall fee, the whole fee for the seminars and the hotel, everything, and the airfare. You can call her starting Monday and find out the exact fee from your particular city. But ordinarily, when we do Agenda 2000, the fee covers breakfast on each day and dinner on Saturday night. Well, this time, the fee covers breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, as well as our own Saturday night banquet. but breakfast, lunch, and dinner daily, as well as snacks, all included in the fee. Now, how about this? All soft drinks, all beer, soft drinks, and bar drinks are covered in the fee. And I'm looking for the fees. Sound like the fees are going to be a lot, right? No, but the fee is what it generally is. It is including the conference fee, the seminar fee. The overall fee will be $550, and then you have to attach the airfare. 1-800-326-2529. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, Bob.
Hi.
This is Marilyn. I get a lot of static earlier, so I didn't hear most of the program. However, what I don't know whether you or somebody else, said the same thing, but I really believe that everything ties into the same thing, and that is the building of all those jails. That is the replacement of the schools, and I think that they throw monkey wrenches into everything we go into, businesses, hospitals, everything. That's what I think. But you're doing a very good job. Thank you.
All right now. Thank you for your call.
Right.
This is Night Talk. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Bob.
Hi.
I just want to say, concerning the trip, you are just too good that you would sacrifice yourself like that. Tell me something. You even go in the ocean?
No, I don't know about that part.
Uh-huh.
I don't like.
We can't ask too much.
That's right. I might go sit out there near the ocean.
Okay.
I want to see how the sun actually bounces off the water.
Okay.
I'll do that for y'all.
Don't overdo it, though.
Yeah.
But we appreciate it. You are just too good. Oh, I don't believe it.
All right.
Okay, Bob.
Okay. All right. This is Night Talk, folks. Y'all are crazy. I'm at 1-800-326-2529. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Brother Bob.
Yes.
This is Abdul Shabab.
Yes, sir.
And you're really doing a good job trying to explain this phonics to people. And, on Brother Tom's show, he tried to explain. They've had specialists on, language specialists, and I don't understand. There's something wrong with people who don't understand. It seems very clear to understand to me. And we had a brother here, it's a guest at the mosque, number one from New York, Brother Ali Abdul Muhammad, the one he writes in the Final Call.
Yes.
And he was explaining, he carried us back to 2,000 years when Jesus was on the earth, and when he was speaking the same, what they call, the Bible speaks in Ebonics. And when he was explaining to us about when Jesus was speaking to the Jews, and they were telling him that we be the seeds of Abraham, and he went on to explain that to us. They were speaking that then, and that's why you don't understand why it's so hard for a lot of our people to understand what they're trying to do in Oakland, California. I think what it is some of these people need to be taught, not the children, to where they can understand. Cause the children, they're trying to where they can teach them how to understand the standard English, which you've said, and Thomas said, and Dr. Sanders have said, many. And they still don't understand it. It carries me back to something I was reading, this book, Flag of Islam, during the time when the earth and the moon separated, and the scientists, great scientists, were trying to teach people, make people speak one language, and they didn't understand. So it's kind of hard to figure out why people don't understand. And you try to explain it to them and make it very clear, and they still don't understand.
Well, I think that some of it is, as I say, people are embarrassed by the existence of a language form that whites can easily ridicule. And those things that are of a black experience are most often characterized in a white supremacist environment or a Eurocentric environment as being of little or no value.
Yes, sir.
If it is of a white or Eurocentric creation, then it will be considered plausible. It will at least be charming. It will be a colloquial expression. It will be something that no one need feel embarrassed by. People will acknowledge that it is not sufficient, that it is not standard English, but Europeans are not to be embarrassed or denigrated by any of the things that they are doing, whether it is how they speak, what they eat. See, if they have a dish, if there's any European dish that is associated with ethnicity, like pasta, nobody needs to be embarrassed because they like pasta.
Yes, sir.
They can acknowledge in public that they like pasta, that they eat pasta, they eat spaghetti, and they love it. They can open restaurants specializing in Italian cuisine, however you say that, and without being embarrassed. However, if you like watermelon, though, black folk are so conditioned by our experience in this society that we think that liking watermelon is something that we ought to be embarrassed by, something that we ought to hide, even if we like fried chicken.
Yes, sir.
We think that we are not supposed to acknowledge that we like fried chicken because it is something that is denigrated in this white supremacist environment. Everything that black folk do is denigrated. So I understand that is why black folk are embarrassed by a public discussion of what would be considered an inadequacy within the black community. What they are saying in Oakland is you need not be embarrassed because this linguistic system is not an inadequacy.
That's right.
The fact that whites don't speak it or don't approve of it, because whites speak their own form. Many ethnic groups, European ethnic groups, speak their own form of broken English. But they are never denigrated because of it. They are never made to be embarrassed because of it. And bilingual educational programs exist in their schools in order to correct their misuse of standard English.
But what I don't understand, Brother Bob, they read the Bible, and you know how the Bible speaks.
Well, but again, they say that is an ancient form, and that's one of the reasons that they have written Bibles, printed Bibles now, rather, in what is called the New English. I forgot what it's called, the New something language, where the original text, as it is expressed in the Bible, has now been changed, because there's a rejection of those things that are old, that are ancient, and that takes me to a whole different discussion, because we do not understand that they are not, those are not voices or ideas from the past. We don't understand that those are voices and ideas from the future.
Yes, sir.
When you consider how we have rejected certain kinds of medicine, treatments for illnesses, because it's what the old folk used to do.
That's right.
It's what grandma used to teach.
And it worked.
And you know that if it was something that grandma used to teach and the old folk used to do back in the Caribbean or back in the country or back in Africa, then certainly it is of little value now, and we just laugh about how, even though it's something the old folk used to teach, we laugh about how it did seem to work. However, Europeans discovered that stuff and called it New Age medicine.
That's right.
And are now attempting to package it and own it. You know, it is. If I got distracted, Jeffrey tried to get my attention while I was talking. I think he does that on purpose because he thinks I'm moving too smoothly. So he wants to interrupt my smooth flow. But I'm out of time.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Tell Jeffrey I got a beautiful engineer here I want him to meet.
You have a beautiful engineer you want Jeffrey to meet?
Yeah, engineer.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll tell her.
Yes, sir.
But she probably don't want to meet him, though.
Yes, sir. Very intelligent. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, I thank you for your call. We'll be right back.
You're tuned into Information Radio. Night Talk with Bob Law continues after this.
The U.S. Army presents Suli McCullough with Comic Strips.
I just further went to go see Dr. Dre. He saw Snoop and Dr. Dre in concert. Said he saw Robin Leach getting into the show. I would have paid all kinds of money to be there. Bow wow wow, yippee-oh, yippee-yay. Robin Leach definitely in the house. This $1 million mansion You'll never live here. It's just for me and my boy Snoop, because it's all good, isn't it, Snoop?
Comic strips have been brought to you by the U.S. Army. U.S. Army presents Dave Chappelle with comic strips.
Nobody told me that cabs don't stop for black people in New York. Everyone looking at me like, oh, he's going to be disappointed. Taxi! I came out here once. I caught a cab on the first try. I just, taxi! You better go ahead.
Comic strips have been brought to you by the U.S. Army.
Why wait for cold pills to dissolve so they can start working? Get Alka-Seltzer Plus cold medicine. Its burst of effervescence means its strong medicine is ready to rush relief the instant you take it. So what are you waiting for? Get fast relief for your worst colds with Alka-Seltzer Plus cold medicine. Now in great tasting orange and new cherry. Use only as directed.
Friendly service comes from the heart and the caring people at Walmart.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm department manager at Walmart in Matson, Illinois. My father believes that in order to always be right, you've got to always do right in your personal life and in your job. So when I commit myself to satisfying a customer and doing the best I possibly can, I pay tribute to my father every day.
The Walmart family salutes African-American families, always.
1-800-326-2529 gets you on the information highway. 1-800-326-2529 is the number to the conversation line.
I'm Bob Law. The program is Night Talk, and this number 7 is that's not for me. It is for me. All the calls on this board are for me. I see. Okay. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes. Good morning, Bob Law.
Hi.
Namaskar to you and the Night Talk family.
Namaskar.
All right. I think that really, Reverend Jesse Jackson, right about now, really ought to be ashamed of himself, the way he handled this situation.
Well, I'm looking at the final call, as the brother mentioned that there was an article about this whole issue in the final call, and so I was able to get the final call here on the internet, and they early in the article they mentioned Reverend Jackson, and they point out that Reverend Jackson retracted his initial statement where he said that Ebonics is teaching down to our children and that the program is bordering on disgrace after seeking clarity in a December 23rd letter to the school board. They kind of helped, as well as a number of members of the African-American community in Washington and in Chicago on WOL and WVON, made it clear to Reverend Jackson that he was doing much more of a disservice in making public statements based on a misunderstanding.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to allude to. The fact that he came home one evening and turned on the evening news and saw this issue and then jumped on a plane and ran out there and hopped on a fire truck to go put out a fire that he had no idea how it started or how to put it out on those brothers and sisters out there. He had not even read the proposal.
Yeah.
You see, now that's where he was wrong at.
Well, he has admitted it.
See, Bob, the point that I'm trying to get to in terms of the curriculum of inclusion, when we, the community was marching with you years ago around the curriculum of inclusion, the question that I want to ask you and the Night Talk family is, where was Reverend Jesse Jackson, Maya Angelou, and Infumi when you were and we were out there marching around this very same? That's what it was all about. Where were they at?
Couldn't get Jesse to say curriculum.
You see?
Then the article in the final call points out that Reverend Jackson's primary concern was how the decision was played in the media and how it was perceived in our village. That is from board member Tom Cook said after the December 30th meeting. The fact is, the confusion in terms of how it was perceived in our village was as a result of Jesse.
But he perceived it